story really begins with a regret for my days as a youth, and that's something that's a universal story. Because we all have something we regret, something we wish we could do over again. Mine was from the summer when I was 16 years old. I had just gotten a car, and the deal that I had made with my parents is that with the car, I would go out and get a job so I can pay for the gasoline and the upkeep. And I took a job at a Burger King. So I went to spend that summer frying French fries in lard and running frozen patties through this conveyor belt of flame-broiled burgers people's way. And in doing so, I gave up an opportunity to have spent that summer with my grandfather learning to cook in his kitchen. Now, my grandfather was Manuel Fins, who was a renowned chef. Before coming to America, he had lived in Spain, where he learned to cook, and then worked in Cuba, where he ran a very famous restaurant. And he became a celebrity chef and would be in ads and in magazines for cooking products and in the society pages and so forth. And then when he was exiled to Miami, he started a new restaurant called Los Violins, which was in 1970s Miami the place to be. And don't take my word for it. Our food and dining writer, Liz Balmaceda, went there plenty of times, and she can vouch for me. It's not fake news, it's true. But in any event, I had the opportunity to work that summer with him, learning to cook paella and Empanada Espanola and all kinds of dishes. But I took the job at Burger King. And the other regret about that, too, is that for my grandfather, cooking and food wasn't just a menu, something to make a livelihood from. He used it to build a bond between people, to get people to talk to each other, to know each other, and hopefully to settle their differences amicably. And, of course, to celebrate in times of joy and to console in times of sadness. And that's kind of where I'm going to begin with the first dish that I remember as a child, and that was the empanada. But this is not the empanada we know today, that finger food. This is the Empanada Espanola, which was a big pie. And my favorite was the one that he made with maple sweetened serrano ham and Spanish chorizo. And then he had it enveloped in this very sweet bread. And I remember when I was 5 years old, the 4th of July, we were going to do a beach picnic, watch fireworks, and have this empanada, which was my favorite. So I was so excited that 4th of July. But as the day progressed, it was quickly clear that something was wrong. My mom was crying, my dad was very serious. And later in the day, we were told that we were not going to the beach, we were not having a picnic. We were going to visit our cousins, the Zamoras. Because early that day, they had been told that their eldest son, Wilfredo, had been killed in combat in Vietnam. So we went. We took the empanada that my grandfather made for this beach celebration, and we went to pay our respects to the Zamora family. And I remember that night on a rock wall, watching the fireworks in the distance, eating that empanada and wondering at 5 years old, what was Vietnam? Why were people fighting there? And why would I never see Wilfredo Zamora again? And I should tell you that Wilfredo Zamora was 19 years old when he was smuggled out of Cuba to avoid the Cuban military draft. He had only been in this country 6 months before he was drafted to go to Vietnam, and he chose to go. He was killed 3 weeks before his 22nd birthday, and 3 months before his deployment was to end and he was to come home. There have been a lot of 4th of July since then, and I always serve something to remind me of the sacrifice that he made. And as a reminder, whether it be an empanada, that the freedoms that we celebrate that day came at a high price for some. Other foods my grandfather made have happier occasions to them. One was the paella, which is a very popular and well-known dish. My grandfather made it really standard, except that he loaded up with seafood. Now, I was not a very big fan of it, except the lobster. And I was known that when the paella was done, I was known to go and pilfer all the lobster out of it. And that really pissed off everybody, especially my brother and my cousins. And I would tell them, hey, it's okay. I left you the shrimp, and that's like little lobsters. They never bought it. I was hoping maybe Louis Bassi might back me up on that, but I'm not going to count on that. I'm just going to move on. Now, that paella, we know it as something that you serve at times of festivities and fun and joy, and it's true. But I remember it mostly as a comfort food. I mean, really a comfort food. because that's what we served when we had newly arrived family from Cuba. See, and you've seen the images of these airport reunions of family, and there's hugging and tears of elation, and people hadn't seen each other in 15 years, and it's an emotional moment of happiness, and that's all true. But then what happens is that when you leave the airport, a very different mood sets in. Fear, anxiety, what now? You're in a new country, you don't know what you're gonna do, you left everything you know behind. Some people are heartbroken because they left behind parents and siblings. But then they arrived at Los Violins, and my grandfather was there, and this big paella was there, and they started eating. And my grandfather explained to them, hey, it's okay, we got a job for you here at the restaurant, we have an apartment for you, in no time you're gonna be on your feet. It's all gonna be okay. And then throughout this meal, other family members showed up. There's Antonito and, and Delia and Estela and Dominguito. Everybody shows up, and the newly arrived family sees, oh, wait a minute, these are the same people that have gone through the same process we're about to go to, and they came out okay. And by the end of the meal, everybody felt better. Because it's true, they were all gonna be good. It was all gonna be all right. Everybody was gonna be okay. Well, not me so much. Because after that meal is done, invariably, they went up to my grandfather and they said, great paella, but why don't you have lobster? And they would all glare at me, and I'm like, hey, I gotta run, Burger King's calling, we just got a load of frozen fries and 2 buckets of lard, and fry cook's gotta go to work. Now, I will tell you that the third dish that I remember most from my grandfather was his shrimp cocktail. Now, that shrimp cocktail wasn't standard. What he did was, first, he marinated those shrimp. He soaked them in this concoction of citrus juices and some sugar. Then he steamed them, and then he chilled them, and then the dip, which was made of guava. But it's not the guava paste you get at Publix. He used a real guava fruit. And when you dip that shrimp in that dip and you took a bite of it, man, that was an entire explosion of Caribbean flavors in your mouth. And I remember that shrimp cocktail mostly with my cousin Rosa Margarita's wedding. By the time of Rosa Margarita's wedding, my grandfather had gotten more than 120 family members out of Cuba, representing about 20 or so different family units. And it was at that wedding where everybody came together. Now, not everybody come to Miami. Many had gone to Boston or Cincinnati, Spain, Puerto Rico. But for my cousin Rosa Margarita's wedding, everybody showed up. And of course, the paella was there, and they had the lobster, because trust me, that paella at that wedding, they had better security than those top secret documents at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, in the kitchen, there was, the Navy SEAL Team 6 was in the kitchen ready to jack me to Guantanamo if I went anywhere near those lobsters. But that's okay, because I went after those shrimp, and so did everybody else. And during that cocktail hour, we all got together, we all met each other, we all exchanged photographs, we took pictures, we had fun, we ate the shrimp cocktail. And for my grandfather, who had fled fascist Spain, then communist Cuba, and at a time when most senior citizens are just hanging out at the beach playing shuffleboard, my grandfather was rescuing a family. For him, that wedding, that reception, was the capstone of his life. 2 weeks after that wedding, I took the job at the Burger King. Sorry, Andrew. And to think about it, and I spent the summer, frying French fries and grilling burgers and, emptying the trash cans and hosing down the dumpsters. I mean, I can almost see that the young reporters of the Palm Beach Post are like, hey, when Antonio comes to give you career advice, just tell him no thanks, SpongeBob. Meanwhile, Hannah Morris, who was my storyteller coach, she's like shaking her head thinking, all these great storytellers, I got stuck with the fry cook from the chump bucket. But the thing about it is this. Even though I didn't learn to cook like my grandfather, I feel like I followed in his footsteps. He used food to bring people together. We use words in journalism. We tell stories. And hopefully those stories build a better understanding of all our backgrounds and our experiences. And maybe that better understanding actually builds a more just, more tolerant, and more compassionate society. And maybe hearing these stories here tonight inspires some of you to reflect on your own life experiences and think, you know what, I got a really good story too. And maybe it inspires you to be a storyteller at a future event. We know there's one coming up in November. But as I'm telling my story, I'm not kidding myself. I know that you much rather would have enjoyed this story over one of my grandfather's paella or the empanada or the shrimp cocktail. But I thank you for listening to it just the same. Thank you.